Welcome everybody to today's brown bag. Bryan is going to be talking about starting a startup today. For those of you who are newer to Virtual Coffee, we sometimes do these, different community members lead them, and they get recorded and posted. So if you want to go back and listen, or if you miss something, you can always go back and access that. So thanks for being here. And Bryan, whenever you are ready, go for it.
Cool. So I sort of wanted to keep this one relatively loose. Like I've actually found that it's more fun with a lot of these brown bags, but I just want to talk through a little bit about the typical things that people encounter when they're sort of getting into the entrepreneurship game. It's sort of, entrepreneurship ultimately encompasses a lot more than technology, but I think it's relatively become somewhat synonymous with the technology industry. A large percentage of the biggest private companies in the world right now are in the technology sector, and that idea of like founding a business, starting, growing a business, the unicorn, all those sort of like popular terms have all stemmed kind of out of the technology space. And so it seems sort of fitting to frame it in that way. And anything that I'm going to offer is going to come from that position. I always like to start off these kind of discussions with a little bit of creds. Is if you're going to talk about this stuff, you should be able to at least argue that you know a little bit about what you're talking about. I've been at least around the startup world for most of my career. I worked out of 3 back-to-back startups right out of college, including one where I was the second person to join, one where I was the third person to join, and one where I was the 7th person to join. I have founded 3 startups. One got acqui-hired, one fizzled out, and one I am still actively doing. I have helped in some capacity raise over $100 million in venture capital. Oh, that was and have had leadership level roles at about 3 other startups, and just sort of have been around the space for a long time, and have made plenty of friendships with VCs, with fellow founders, with people, advisors, people who sort of swirl around the space. I often advise incubators and other groups, and just generally like the world of the startup. The thing I always like to start with these kind of discussions are why you might like a startup, like sort of what motivates you to either found one or be a part of one. The first and foremost, most important piece of that is working at, how do I describe this? A rather intense pace. One of the things that has always attracted me to startups, both founding them and working for them, is the ability to have a deep impact on a business from top to bottom, play multiple different roles, wear multiple different hats, and the need to be busy and be intense. I like working in a space that's sort of a little under pressure, and is sort of always under the gun, always focused on bottom line numbers, really looking to make sure that they're hitting their metrics and have very clear and concise deadlines and goals for how they're going to succeed. You spend some time at sort of mid-sized or larger successful businesses, they'll set their own priorities, but there's a little lost sense of urgency typically once you've reached revenue profit positive, and you're sort of in more of a typical growth mode. So any questions? I want to make sure this is a little bit interactive. I could just vamp for well more than an hour, but if make sure anybody has anything they want to discuss, please feel free to speak up. So just as a general, like how to start a startup, the things I like to sort of like walk through these in sort of specific phases. The first that I always sort of kick with is some of the misconceptions of what is involved in starting a startup, or like the typical failure modes is sort of the wrong way to look at it, but the typical sort of pitfalls that people get trapped into. The biggest one that I always key against is the risks and issues around the idea. To give you a little bit of context, I have worked for or started 7 startups in my career. Every single one of them has gone through, at some point while I was there, a significant pivot. And at least 3 of them, the pivot was so significant that effectively it was a different business. They went into an entirely different direction. They launched an entirely different product suite. They scrapped huge amounts of work. They went through layoffs and rehires and essentially retooled entirely. that is an enormously common phenomenon in startups. In general, this is sort of circles around why, if you ask any venture capitalists why and how they choose to invest in a business, the vast majority of them will say, or I should say seed stage, early stage investment, they invest in people, not businesses. Ultimately, for companies that are less than 3 years old and have raised less than 2 rounds of financing, you're really targeting the people. You're targeting the founders. What do they look like they'll be able to deliver? Which is why a lot of diligence is very much focused on tackling those founders' knowledge bases. What do they know? How deep does their expertise seem to go? What is their background like? Have they done this before, at least worked in this capacity before? Because they know more than likely a seed stage or early stage business in this space is going to go through a lot of turmoil. It just is. It's sort of the nature of it. There's always exceptions to every rule. There's plenty of examples you could point to of startups that were rocket ships right from the beginning, never had to pivot, just took off. But that's exceedingly rare. And the vast majority of what I would call successful startups are not in that category. And so while people definitely need an idea, when you're launching a business, you should have something you're specifically doing, some sort of plan, some sort of mission. I have seen sort of an hyper focus on the idea and sort of getting latched onto the idea of innovating something as opposed to building a business. And those two things can be rather different. The sort of way I always frame it is, if you were told tomorrow that you would get financing, but you have to throw away your idea, are you married to the idea, or are you married to the idea of building a business? And oftentimes that can be a sticking point, especially with engineers who oftentimes are very creatively driven and sort of focused on innovative solutions as opposed to raising money, getting customers, working at sales, working on marketing. And so that brings me to like the next piece, which is exactly what kind of founder are you looking to be? So the other sort of piece of this puzzle is often solo founding businesses are also exceedingly rare. They're incredibly rare to ever successfully raise money. Venture capitalists and other investors are going to want to look for teams of people. I would say usually at least 2 founders. I've seen teams of 3 and 4, depending on exactly how things get outlaid. The reason for that is a couple of fold. The simplistic reason is just because people have different skill sets. And so typically you're looking for somebody who's going to take care of the technical components, is going to help build out the technical team, or somebody who's going to manage more of the business aspects of it, somebody who's going to handle the marketing aspects of the business, and sort of looking for that diverse skill set that rounds out like a solid founding team that an investor thinks can really take whatever idea they're tackling and bring it up to the next level. But then there's also the other piece, which is just founding a company is insanely hard. It is painful. It requires incredible hours. It often has lots of ups and downs. There's actually a significant amount of research that entrepreneurs and founders often suffer from depression and other issues. Like it's a very, very tough challenge. And so in addition to just looking for, does the people involved in it have the mettle to handle that, they also want to make sure they have a partner, they have teams, people they can lean on, somebody that they can rely on when times are tough, and they can sort of collaborate with and sort of work through problems with. And so a lot of investors will also spend a lot of time looking at that team dynamic. How do people interact together? How do the founding team work together? Do they seem to be able to handle problems effectively, or is this going to be a potentially, intense situation? And so the third piece of sort of like starting the business is then the actual business. I sort of like focused on people component, and then obviously you need some kind of idea. And then typically the final phase is just actually starting to build something. Very frequently, a lot of startups will initially spin out of side projects. My current business spun out of a side project. I was employed working on something on the side about 6 months with a co-founder. And after it reached a critical point of development where we felt like we could pitch it to customers, then it became sort of the decision point of like, is it time to jump and actually do this full time? And so building the piece, I always sort of tease is that those early days of building a company are, a lot of people reminisce as the more fun, because you have a business, you have a scale, you have an idea, but typically it's just development. You're just building. You're doing some of the basic scaffolding of the business. You start to, chaining a legal team to sort of handle the process of both incorporating and setting up some of your business scaffolding, like terms of service and any basic contracts you need. getting other basic stuff like bank accounts and credit cards and just getting all the business pieces together. But the vast majority of your time is spent building, because you need something to sell, something to pitch. And very frequently, with the exception of early investors like angel investors, if you want to raise any meaningful money to actually pay yourself, hire employees, you're going to have something in place to actually sort of demonstrate that you have something to sell, you have something to go, you have something to launch from. And so that those first three pieces, I always feel, generally encompass between the first 6 to 12 months of starting a startup. So like things are getting going. It's very small, very tight unit, very tense, long hours, a lot of quick changes, pivots, and innovations. But oftentimes that's where things are the most tight knit. It's almost like friends just building something. Where things get interesting in sort of the startup world is as soon as you've taken on money. So like the first piece of this puzzle is once you've got something of a product in place, you'll start talking to individual investors. And so this sort of will parlay a little bit into something of a short discussion on what it's like to raise money, because that's sort of an essential component of building a startup. Before I dive into that any harder, is I've been rambling for about 15 minutes. Anybody have any questions or thoughts? Or
I do. I'm curious. Okay. I'm curious for anyone with an idea who would like to make a go at it, but you're alone. How do you find co-founders? How do you find other people to bring onto the team? How do you find people with experience that could extend yours or complement yours?
Right. That's a good one. So this is actually, I think, I'm glad you brought that. That's a really common problem for people who are sort of into the space. The most frequent dynamic you'll see, or that I'll encounter, is a business co-founder or a non-technical co-founder looking for a technical co-founder. This actually happens quite a bit. Some of it stems from the nature of how business schools and other sort of like non-technical programs tend to foster innovation in the group, is that they'll pitch them on ideas and business plans, but they won't have the acumen to build things. And so you actually see a lot of forums at meetups and even job postings outright just looking for technical co-founders. But I have actually also seen it in reverse, where you take technical co-founders who have built a product but have no idea how to scale a business. How to do it? I mean, really, it kind of comes down to networking. This is sort of where the classic methods of sort of recruiting talent really break down. Your co-founder, for lack of a better word, needs to be a friend. It doesn't necessarily need to be a best friend. It doesn't need to be family, but it needs to be somebody who you can really get along with, because times will be tense. It just will. Sort of like ties into what I was saying. It can't be somebody that's just there to be a hired gun. And that's actually a common mistake some non-technical co-founders do when they first go out, is they essentially just tackle somebody that they only kind of know, throw them some equity and a little bit of cash and say, you're not a co-founder, but they don't have that relationship built yet. And so it becomes almost like an employee-employer relationship, where the bulk of the business success is in the hands of somebody who doesn't feel as bought in or desperate for the success as your initial co-founder would. So typically, I would say circle around the network of people you know for the type of co-founder you're looking for, and start that process early. This sort of like ties back a little bit to something I probably should have mentioned, which is, with a couple of exceptions, most people who build successful startups over their careers don't do it suddenly and once. It's almost like a sub-discipline of engineering. Like if you could be a front-end engineer, being an entrepreneur is almost in and of itself its own sub-discipline of technology. Very frequently, people who have had successful startups have had a couple of failed startups. The nature of the space is you're going to do this a couple of times. You might do it a bunch of times. You'll certainly work within the space a bunch of times, whether you found all of them or you just work for them. But typically, people who do successful startups are always around successful startups. And so start that process early. If you have an interest in this space, if you have that drive to want to build something of your own rather than working for others, build that network early. Start talking to people, get familiar with the space. You'll end up working around and with a lot of the same people. So get to know people who have done this before, go to meetups, or in this case, virtual meetups, attend conferences, and just sort of continue to craft that network as you go. Not necessarily specifically looking for one type of people, but just making sure that people who are interested in this space, who have that kind of personality, have that kind of drive, get to know them and sort of start building out that practice. So when your time comes that you have a specific idea or something you want to tackle, you kind of have a Rolodex to go to. And then in reverse, it works both ways. You know, I've had friends in the space that have come to me with, you know, I'm now at a new startup and I'm looking for somebody to come on and run my A department or run, you know, technology. And that's sort of how that bi-directional process sort of kicks off.
How would someone maybe go about trying to find organizations to connect with, especially right now, virtually? What do I put into Google?
That's interesting. So, I mean, I guess I would probably start with specific professional meetups that sort of exist already and have a professional network connection. So like, there's a lot of meetups and conferences that are very vertically focused, and so kind of target where your interests are. You know, my background's machine learning, and so most of the things I go to and attend to sort of do this stuff is machine intelligence conferences. There's a couple of like AI dinners and other things that get hosted that have sort of converted into virtual dinners, and so yeah, just start Googling essentially the spaces you're interested in. Sort of related to that, one of the common things to do here is just to get to know existing startups that are in spaces you're interested in. So if you have an interest in consumer retail, looking for area startups that are already in motion and then connecting with their founding teams is another great way to network. A lot of my more favorable network connections are people who I just went after when they were working at something that was interesting to me. You know, like they founded a healthcare startup I thought was neat and I wanted to learn more about it. So I invited them to coffee, and that's sort of how I got to know them. And now I've known them for years. And so that kind of process of just circling around the people and spaces you're interested in. So to your point, Googling companies that you find impressive and then cold reaching out to founding teams and just wanting to chat. Ironically, I think you'll find a decent amount of success from that because these people are used to being bombarded with job requests. And so if it's quite literally just I just want to have coffee and pick your brain and like, you know, we can share and get to know each other, very often that'll be a good to go. It certainly was for me.
Bryan, I have a question.
Shoot.
So I've had a couple encounters with startup founders in the past, typically people looking for a technical person for their team. And I guess let's say you're in that position. Someone is like a very, very early stage startup is approaching you.
Yep.
What are you looking for as a criteria for these people might be good to work with?
Probably a combination of things. So like probably the first thing I would look for is track record. So like obviously people who are doing this for the first time are not a deal breaker. Everyone's going to start somewhere. You might want to jump onto an adventure like that. But it always is worth noting sort of what I was describing. Very few founders find their rocket ship the first time out. And so I'm more inclined, for instance, to do one of those now than I would have been 10 years ago. I'm more secure. I've been in the space longer. I feel like I can sort of handle that risk a little bit more. And so if I was sort of getting into the game early, or if it's only, you know, if I've only been in the space for a little while, I would look for somebody who's done this more and have had some successes. I don't need $1 billion exit or anything crazy, but like they've at least built a business, hired some people, they've done some stuff, and they sort of understand how the space works. Then the most important thing for me would be getting to know them really, really well. And so spend a couple of times meeting them, talking with them, you know, having coffee with them, and don't just talk business. Like get to know, you know, sort of as I said, founding teams have to be friendly. They don't need to be genuine friends, but they need to be able to handle a significant number of differing things together. Get to know them on a personal level. You know, mostly just as a function of getting to know their personality. Are they going to be a hard-nosed founder? Are they going to be more lenient? What do you think they're, you know, trying to get a general sense of feel how they'll handle conflict, how they'll handle downtimes, you know, are they resilient to risk? And even just generally their risk tolerance, like what do they like to do for fun? You know, there's this that you can kind of glean actually quite a bit from a person's personality by the kind of things they enjoy doing. And then the third thing would probably be focusing in on their expertise levels. Every founder needs to come with some kind of expertise. It's not going to be enough to just be like, I have an idea. Like, okay, but what are you going to be delivering on here? What is your area of specialty? Do you have a marketing background? You're going to help scale the business. Do you have a technical background? You're going to help me build the product. sort of get a sense of what they bring to the table, because the idea is nothing. Ideas mean nothing. This is actually, that sort of cuts to the jib of what I meant earlier, which is ideas are kind of useless. Everybody's got ideas. Ideas are extremely common. And so it's not so much the idea so much as the ability to execute on the idea. So get that sense of their ability to execute. What are they bringing to the table? They're coming to you to do what is one of the harder parts of it, which is building the product. So what are they delivering for you? Think of it like, a mutual relationship where you're going to need to get give and take from both sides. What is their give? And then even when you've got all those pieces in place, if you still think it's a good opportunity, you like the industry, you like the concept, make sure you set yourself up in a position where you can sort of trial things a little bit. You'll want to spend a little bit of time with your foot still in whatever you're doing now before you fully jump ahead. Do some development together, do some launching together, start the process. One of the common mistakes of people who have a little bit of security is to immediately jump. They just sort of jump into the next thing. That's very rarely required to succeed in the startup world. There is sort of a critical point where you've got enough success, you've got enough in place that if you want to really scale it, you're going to have to dedicate yourself to it. But those early days where you're just getting something together, it's almost probably better for even your mental health if it's not full time initially. Get to know each other, get to know the business you're building into. You'd be amazed at how quickly you might discover things. Like maybe the TAM for that business is way smaller than you expected, or the client base is going to be way harder to target, or the creep on product is going to quickly spiral. Like, you want to learn some things about the space a little bit before you really throw yourself into it, because when you do throw yourself into it, barring a very fast success or failure, you're probably going to be doing it for several years. Like, it's just 3 to 5 or more years. So sort of get used to that. Did I answer your question, Kirk?
No, you should do that all again.
Do it all over again.
That was actually pretty good, because that was sort of like one of the things I encountered. Like, a lot of people, I had a lot of the, we're looking for a tech person. We have this great idea, but we can't tell you until you agree to be. And I'm like, I can have an idea. I don't know. Like you said,
yeah.
It wasn't. And then when one of the ones I work with, we went through like an incubator, and they told us, listen, until you have actual boots on the ground and responses and customer feedback, you don't even have anything. Like, you think you have an idea, but you don't even know if it's good. And I guess my follow-up question to that was that in the incubator, they emphasized how much the tech wasn't necessarily the point right at the beginning. And people think we make the thing first and then we get people to use it. It's like, no. You should already have something going even before you start building it out. You should have people signed up for your early release, even if you haven't built the release yet.
Yep.
And I was starting to realize, in terms of technical ability at that point, maybe instead of focusing on core business logic, it seemed like the best asset was somebody who could spin up a front-facing site very quickly, somebody who could do forums and collect that type of thing. I'm wondering, if you're looking to get into the startup business, are those the types of skills you should probably bolster and emphasize?
Yeah, so it's sort of interesting you describe that. I'll this a little bit cuts to something that is more of an opinion of mine than fact, which a lot of this, I guess, is. Some of the things I'll describe will probably qualifiable as fact, but I actually have a pretty strong opinion that early technical founders in companies should be actually kind of shit engineers. And I say that for a very specific reason. It's because you want somebody who is willing to launch terrible code into production with a smile. That is going to build really fast, that is going to do, as you say, just get things out, just launch something, get a registration page, get a registration page out, get an early bones of a system together. Don't worry about scale. You're not sharding yet. You're not doing scale development yet. There's no Heroku or whatever. You just launch something into space. Because very frequently those first days are going to be absolute chaos of pivots and changes and new features and deprecating features and building for whoever is out there. And if you're trying to build hardened code right from the beginning, you're going
Try it again. Nope, not yet.
There we go. I swear, I need a new computer. When did I lose you? I could tell everybody couldn't hear me all of a sudden.
Hardened code.
Okay. If you're focused on building really hardened production scale quality code, you're going to move too slow. Now that phase where you need to do that is shorter than people think. Like we're talking like the first 6 months or so where things are really hectic and you don't have any sense of market fit yet. You're just building to sort of handle the needs of anybody who's willing to give you time of day. You're sort of like targeting early customers, beta customers as fast as you can. You do need to quickly pivot into like, okay, now we might have something. We're starting to feel a sense of fit. The system needs to not go down all the time. We're going to have to start actually hardening some of this stuff up. And so the ideal technical co-founder is somebody who can do both, who is a good engineer, but knows how to be a cowboy coder when they need to be. I'd say that person is actually kind of rare. So usually paradoxically, the most successful technical co-founders I know are dangerous engineers who know enough to build things, almost anything, but they're just not an architect. They're not the people you target for those like senior scale roles. And that's why. So they can handle the process of hiring, they can handle the process of building fast, furious cowboy code. And they understand the space, but they don't need to be the lead on everything. And so then they're willing to hire and grow the team and sort of hand the reins over to better engineers and just be responsible for the direction of the tech team and sort of how things grow. Does that make any sense?
I feel like handing the reins over to someone more qualified and capable requires a level of self-assurance and confidence that I'm not sure I want to have.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's always the ongoing joke after a while of doing that process starts feeling like, what do I do here anymore? You know, like, but that ironically fits into what I was describing with is that a founder is going to have to wear a million hats. It's just the nature of it. Like early on, you know, there's a little bit of a misnomer with the technical co-founder. The technical co-founding phase is the pre-fundraising phase. That's somebody who you brought in who can engineer and is going to do the engineering, but there's still a strong expectation that very quickly that person is going to have to wear more than the engineer hat. They're going to do other things. They're going to start being involved in pitching, in closing deals, in being a public face, you know, being able to talk eloquently about the technology and sort of work through PR strategies. And like, you're not just going to be an engineer. That person is rare. You do actually, because of that, you actually see a lot of founding teams quickly sort of rejigger a little bit. So it's not totally uncommon for a technical co-founder to go through a seed and an A and then be reframed as sort of like a VP of technology. And then somebody else comes in to actually be the CTO. And so you sort of like play with the leadership a little bit as the business scales. The ability for a founding team, you know, whether it's CEO and CTO or COO and CTO, to stay in those C-suite roles all the way through scale is actually quite rare. It's not impossible by any means. It happens way more than like 10%. Like it's in the range, but it's not uncommon for those people to really quickly have the role outgrow them. You know, when you're a technical co-founder of a team of 3, and then 2 years later you're a team of 30. Have you ever managed 30 people before? Like, have you ever had to build a product with that kind of strategic vision? Have you ever had to sell into a B round and actually pitch a 2-year technical vision to a series of B scaling? That, like, there's a whole suite of additional skills that you maybe didn't have when you joined the team. You were brought in just to build something. And so it's not a failure, but it's not uncommon for the board to essentially say, you're just going to be an engineer now because you're good at that. That's what you're brought in to do. You're scaled that you keep your equity, but we're going to rejigger your role a little bit.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, if you could not do the transition and then be like, well, I want to keep, or I'm good at being the person actually actively like managing the tech, can we then like hire the VP of engineering, so to speak, like the person who would technically be in charge of me, but like I still want to be, okay, but you answered that. So that's cool.
No, you're exactly right. And it's sort of funny. The dynamic here is good founding teams will recognize about themselves early, because the ideal scenario, if you play the game right, is you can hire that person for you. I've worked at, I actually watched two founders go through this once in a prior role where they had to hire essentially their replacements. They were bringing in a new CEO and CTO to sort of fulfill their existing roles. Because they were proactive about it and sort of recognized it themselves, talked to the board about it, they got to do it. And they got to be very active in sort of the hiring process, the recruiting process. The danger scenario is where founders cling to their titles, are scared of relinquishing them. And at some point, the board is responsible for saying, no, you're not ready for this role. We're going to find your replacement. And that's obviously never a comfortable scenario. It can cause all kinds of conflict and chaos. And you just don't want your business to sort of fall into that. So this a little bit ties into, as a founder, be really aware of your talents and skills and start preparing for what you think the next phase looks like. Be really honest with yourself about what you think you're good and capable of. If you don't want to manage a big team, then as the company scales, you should be proactive about, okay, this is now outgrowing me. I like managing a team of 5. I don't like managing a team of 40. It's time to bring in an executive who's used to doing that, and I can do what I love to do. Doesn't impact my ownership level, my board vote. I'm still the founder, but I don't need to be at the top. Somebody else is saying something.
I have a question. Oh, did somebody else have something before? I don't want to.
Nope.
Cool. So I've been trying to figure out how to phrase this question, or even what I want to figure out. But like my sort of confusion with a lot of this is like what. All right, let me start with one question. Like what makes you go towards the sort of traditional startup route, like as opposed to just as opposed to more of a, I don't know if traditional is the right word, but like like if I have something, and I remember like you said, a lot of these start as side projects, right? So
yeah,
I have a side project, right? And I have an idea for it, or maybe maybe it's already moving or something like that. It's just me, and I can see it making money. I can see, but more things like ahead or whatever. At what point do you or is it always going to be, at least in your opinion, like the next step is going to be start to like figure out how to make this into the sort of the startup path, like with,
yeah. I think what you're getting at, yeah.
You're at a point where you recognize you need help or whatever, you need more people, and maybe it's not just quite hiring somebody or
right.
Or maybe it is, but like, so at that point, is your instinct just to like, okay, let's just go start down this path? We'll like, if there's already a company, we'll re-register it, in the right way or whatever, and just like start moving down that path? Or is there times where it doesn't make sense to, pursue like the, I don't know, investment and all like all that kind of thing?
I think you actually kind of hit the nail on the head at the end there. So like it's kind of a frame of mind. So like in general when I'm thinking through these kind of things, that's usually where my head goes. Is this something I think can scale? And that's the kind of thing I enjoy. I love that rocket ship feel. The startups I've loved the most are the ones that went from like 7 to 50 people in a year. And that process of like hitting the rocket off the launch pad is what gets me excited. And so like my brain goes to that space when I'm thinking through side projects. Like, is this something I think I could take somewhere interesting? Is the market big? Who am I targeting? Does it look, is this a consumer split? Like you start thinking about it in that way, and then I'll angle it down that path. I've done plenty of things that are just like side projects that I don't intend to build businesses out of. It's just like, okay, this is a thing I'm working on. It's fun. And maybe I make a little money off of it. And God willing, maybe even I can turn it into like a lifestyle business. It sort of just makes me money, but I'm not going to go raise money for that. I'm not going to go hit my VC friends and try to build a team out of that. That's just something that's on the side. It's that, I guess my answer is it's a moment that is hard to sort of pin down as to when or why it happens, but where you just realize this is now time to scale it out. Like I've built something that I think is interesting and I think it has potential. I'm going to go start pitching. Like I want to start seeing if I can scale this. And that's a very deliberate decision, because usually once you start that path, it can get away from you very fast. Like the moment you've raised money, the game is now different. You instantly have a board. You instantly have people who are vested in your success. Now the next round is almost assured, because unless you fail, like, if you're going to do any sort of success, you're not going to have enough money for profit with that first round. And so you're now angling to the next round. That accelerates everything. Everything gets more intense. You have literally a deadline in the future. And so that process starts to roll, and it gets iterative, and it's sort of hard to break out of once it's there. So if you don't enjoy that process, that decision to raise money is really the big pivot point. Like, do I think there's something here that I can scale for? And if so, go talk to investors about.
Is there like I don't know, in your mind, is it possible to create a business that scales, maybe not as quite as fast, but scales and grows and is profitable without getting investors and all that, like
Absolutely,
all the stuff that goes along with that?
In fact, you could make the case that that is the better option if you can pull it off.
Right.
It's less stressful. It's more reliably successful. You'll have your deadlines will be way less intense. And typically, if you're building that kind of bootstrapped business all the way through to scale, then you're being really smart about expenses and money. It really is an outright different beast to build a scale business, like from top to bottom, like even just from cash management point of view, everything. Like it's an entirely different beast. The moment you take on venture capital is the moment you have to shift away from profit thinking, and it's more just about growth at all costs, which is really the modern paradigm for what venture capital is designed to do. So your burn is going to increase substantially, your team size will increase rapidly, your team will reorganize, your product will reorganize rapidly, and you'll have a board that is going to be more invested in your success and focused on shifting and changing things and making sure that everybody's on the same page. None of that needs to be if you have successfully bootstrapped a business to profit, because you don't need a board. You could be a one-person operation at that scale, or a one-person management operation. You might still have to hire engineers or other people below you to work, but you could hire them as straight employees. You won't be accountable to investors looking for returns. You won't be accountable to even customers, frankly. I mean, that phase, other than making sure that you've maintained the profit you need, but not accountable in the sense of like needing to double, triple, quadruple your customers and customer retention every quarter and constantly focused on metrics. Just sort of changes the scale a bit. So you can definitely do that. And I have on more than one occasion seen a business do that for a while and then hit the gas. So like you can build a business to a certain point to sort of defend its reality, then decide, okay, I've been doing this for 2 years. I figured out the market fit and I'm ready to take off. Now I'll go raise money. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. It just happens to be the more romanticized version of this process that gets attention in movies and TV shows is I've got an idea and 6 weeks later I'm in front of VCs and we're off to the races. And that's sort of become the like Facebook model, the Uber model. Like how do we go crazy with this really quickly? But no, you certainly don't have to do that, I think, to succeed. Any other thoughts before I jump into financing? All right, cool. So there's really two main things I was hoping to cover quickly before, although we're already coming up to like quarter of, but is fundraising, which is always its own beast, and it's sort of unique to this particular space, and then early stage hiring. And I find that one kind of interesting because most people here are on the younger side, and there's a very strong component to how startups, I think, hire well. I'll quickly blitz through the financing phase, because I can actually stop it kind of at the A. So there's really kind of three distinct phases that most startups will go through in financing, with a caveat that possibly like a 3A phase. The first round is almost always bootstrap / triple F round. Triple F meaning friends, family, and fools. And so it's the first round of money where you're going to raise small dollar checks, frequently from people you know, and you're talking very little actual money in hand, $50,000, $100,000, certainly not enough to pay yourself or an engineer. That money is entirely geared toward the business side of things. That helps you pay for legal costs. That helps you pay for any early product costs if you need to buy an, AWS compute or whatever sort of early like business and technology costs are required. The expectation being a triple F round is going to last you like 2 months. It's a very short round. It's designed to just get you going so that you're in place to get you to the angel round or the seed round. Those used to be kind of separate things. People would treat the angel round as sort of like an in-betweener round, but really seed now has kind of morphed into like a blended round. In fact, seeds have started to look even a lot more like A's, but the basic process is you take that first triple F money, you demonstrate that you have now built something and it is actually like a functional product. You hopefully even have a couple of really early beta users, probably not paying, but like somebody's on the platform. You've got a defensible market of some kind. now it's time to go raise a little bit more money and actually build a bit of a business. And so your seed round is where you're starting to raise actual money, somewhere in the anywhere framing between like 500 grand and $2 or $3 million. And the idea here being you're going to now pay yourself a little bit of money. You want to be full-time in the business. You're going to probably hire your first 1 or 2 engineers or 1 or 2 employees, depending on the needs of the business. And you're shooting for a very quick turnaround on an actual round somewhere within 6 to 12 months. That seed round, as it's implied, is supposed to seed the business. It just sort of like gets everything up on the up and up. You're no longer just covering the bare minimum expenses. You're actually trying to operate like a real firm of some kind. But the key to the seed round is typically at the seed stage, you have to defend almost nothing. The investor in a seed stage is looking at you. Does this person look like I can make some money off of them? You're not looking at P&Ls, you're not looking at growth metrics yet. You might not even have any customers. You're probably doing a little bit of technical diligence, but for the most part, it's focused on the founding team. As you start to scale it all, start to show some revenue, bring in some customers, the A round is where things get a little more interesting. The A round, investors are still looking at you. And typically by the A round, you still haven't baked in market fit so well that you're not beyond a possible additional pivot or additional shift, but you should have something of a functional business at that point. You've made some money, you have some customers, you have real product. And so metrics start to become important, not necessarily backward looking metrics, how much money have you made so far, but forward looking metrics. What can you actually forecast now? You're not just playing with funny money anymore. We're hoping that you can really say within 2 years, I can hit 1 million ARR, or I can hit X growth on new customer growth. And the A round is your first serious round. Usually A rounds are $5-10 million. That's where you're building an actual full-blown business. You're going to get office space. You're going to hire 10-15 people. You're going to have healthcare plans. Like things start to become real then, which is great from a scale perspective. It also now means things are more intense. You have people that are accountable. You are accountable to now as a founder. I have employees I don't want to have to fire. I have customers that have paid for a product that I want to continue delivering to them. Certainly it's embarrassing to shut down a product with customers that count on it. And so the goal now is to hit those metrics as fast as you can and angle for your growth round, your B round. That's when you're really shooting for the moon. B round means now I have a proper P&L. I have a real reliable revenue base. I could probably even be profitable if I was willing to cut down expenses. But rather than cut down expenses, I'm going to ramp up expenses and try to scale to become a significant business. I won't keep going beyond B, but like that's sort of like the trajectory of fundraising. And the way you raise money at each stage is fairly distinct. So that like triple F round, like I said, you're talking to friends, you're talking to family, might even be your own money, depending on what kind of money you have. The seed round and angel round, you're still looking at individual investors or maybe very light scale institutions. There's a lot of seed funds, but the key is that their investment philosophy at the seed stage is, this is super risky money. I'm not looking for a return for 7 years or more. I'm betting on a person and I'm going to be making lots of those bets. And that's typically sort of how seed investors behave. And then A is your more stable round, and it's almost always institutions. A is when you're talking to actual growth VCs, potentially strategic investors, if you have, depending on the kind of space you're in. Like if you're in the enterprise or SaaS space, getting strategic investment can help build out your customer set, things like that. The other piece I wanted to, does anyone have any questions on that too before I, no, cool. And then the other main thing I was hoping to touch on a little bit is hiring at startups. So the interesting phase of sort of like growth for most startups is early people, the founding team and maybe like the first hire, if you're lucky, probably aren't even getting paid. Or if they are getting paid, they're getting paid very little. They're getting paid sort of like the bare minimum they can cover to make sure people yeah, to make sure that people aren't like starving in the street. They can afford like a place to live and food. It's not entirely out of the realm. I've seen plenty of startups do this where you might even be living together. Like it's a very unique situation when that very early team has a couple of bucks, but they're getting something going, but they have very little to work with. And so the process of getting from there to hiring senior engineers making 200K is a very interesting evolutionary step. There always are a certain flavor of person who, even if they are super senior and super talented, are willing to take huge pay cuts for equity because that's who they are. And if you know those people, attract them as much as you can, but you'd be amazed at how rare that person actually is. If somebody's worth 200K a year, they want 200K a year. And so it's not totally uncommon for, and speaking specifically to this audience, for startups to go after juniors, because they sort of check a lot of the boxes that startups look for. They are inexpensive, younger, hungry, and probably willing to wear different hats. They haven't sort of baked into a role yet. They haven't been doing the same thing for 10 years and this is what I do. They're sort of still finding the phase there. And for juniors, at least this was my experience when I was sort of going through this process back in my 20s, when I was sort of like out of college and sort of building my career. It's attractive the other direction because it allows you to do a lot of things really fast. You're going to wear a zillion hats. You're going to get your fingers into a lot of different pies. And so it sort of becomes a little bit of a launching pad for the next thing you want to do. Or if you stay there and grow, you can have an incredible leapfrog in role opportunity. I went from graduating college to being a director of technology basically by doing this, by joining that 3-person team, letting it grow to 30-person team. And I was just, oh shit, I guess I'm the guy. I probably didn't deserve that title. I probably sucked at it, but it sort of like gave that weird boost to your career. Like nobody else knows that. When you look at Tech's role and it says director of technology, you worked there for 4 years. Why not? And so that hiring process is intriguing. So if you're the founding person, my recommendation is to focus on people who are not yet super established. If you're lucky and you've been doing this for a while, you do start to build a team around you. Like I've been working with the same engineer set for years and I've known the same people years. So now it's gotten a little easier at this point where I can just go, okay, I've worked with you before and I can pluck people around. But the first couple of volleys out for people who are into startups, you're still building that network set. It's worth attracting people who just fit the personality role without yet fitting the technical role. Look for people who are hungry, who are curious, who are growing fast, and get them early and then help them grow with you. And they'll, work at different paces. And then as you're scaling, the trick is, we always sort of joke, we've talked before in like the hiring forums and hiring discussions about like raises is a sort of an interesting problem for companies that you hire young and everybody gets money for like jumping roles. That weird transition phase that lasts for about 12 to 18 months is one of the few phases where companies that are doing it all a good job do offer significant raises really quickly, because the whole idea is you're attracting people early and giving them very little with the strong expectation that the whole idea is you get to your seed round and your A round and we're going to turn into a real business. And so almost at every phase of that, those people should be making jumps in money. They should, you bring in that first person that's not a founder, but is hired, but is making 5% equity and only working for 40 grand a year. As soon as you raise a seed, that person should be making 70 grand a year. As soon as you raise an A, they should be bumping up again. Like the whole idea is to reward those employees for that early loyalty by rapidly letting them grow within the company and sort of sticking with the company as it scales. Any questions on that? No? Anything else that I can continue to talk about things like how to construct teams, how to hire and fire, which is always sort of an interesting thing in this phase, because very frequently when you're hiring for startups, you're hiring people furiously with shorter interview cycles. You're taking stronger chances, which means you also have faster hooks. I have unfortunately in the past had to lay off people after just 3-4 months because I took a gamble. Didn't have time to do a 3-month recruitment process. I needed somebody in the door tomorrow. And so you just start to jump and sort of roll with the punches, but those come with their own challenges and pains. And I can cover stuff like that, or if there's any questions in general about the space. Or
are you, when you hire somebody like that in that situation, do you try to be upfront about that? Like when, during the hiring process, like with these accelerating ones where, like,
yes.
Do you try to, like, when you're hiring these people, do you try to be upfront about just exactly what you just said,
Yeah.
like you're in that situation?
It's interesting. So the answer is yes. There is sort of a funny game you play with that process in that you don't just want to scare them shitless either. Like it doesn't want to be like, I'm going to hire you, but you're probably going to be fired in 3 months. Like you can't set the tone negatively. So there's a bit of a wooing process where you're trying to set the standard that I expect success and I want you to succeed and you'll be here for a while. But being really upfront that like, this is going to be hard. I'm going to be expecting a lot out of you. And we'll be continuously evaluating how this is going, and we'll sort of adjust as we go. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a wordsmithing game in how you do it to make sure that you are actually successfully recruiting and not scaring everybody away. But I do try to make it really clear that the expectations will be high. We're a startup. We're going to be hustling. We all work really hard, and I'm going to be demanding of you, of you and your time and of your energy.
You sort of answered. I think that's going to be my follow-up, was like, if there's, I don't know, if you have some sort of, whether it's formal or not, like more specific, review stuff, and like maybe more often or more intense, as a sort of warning, both for you and for the employee or whatever,
Yeah. Like I try to, so at that phase of company, and really all the way through like A phase, I try to, so there's sort of this Goldilocks zone where you get comfortable enough with an employee that they're not going anywhere. They're good enough. They're going to be stable. And frequently when they get to that point, I will transition rapidly and suddenly into actually not talking to them a lot because I'm expecting independence and autonomy. But the only way to get there is the counter to that is usually when I'm hiring somebody that phase, before I get there, I'm going to be talking to them a lot. And so it's not even really like I'm reviewing you. It's really, I'm just always in your face. I'm going to talk to you every week. I'm going to talk to you after every deployment, every fix, and we're going to sort of get a sense of how things are going. How are you scaling? How are you growing? And I'm going to just be on your ass for a couple of weeks, couple of months. And it just trying to get to that point where it's like, I don't need to anymore. I'm comfortable with this person. I can just give them a task and they can run with it, which is what I need to really have this role succeed at this stage of business. Or I'm not getting there and we need to make an adjustment. Yeah.
Can I sneak in one last question real quick?
Of course.
Okay. So, I mean, if you are looking to get into this space, especially in these COVID times, like before, like I was in New York, it's like, oh, well, yeah, you're here, or if you're in LA, you're here. But if you're not, what do you do if you're not in New York or LA? And I mean, well, in my case specifically, I'm not even like in the US right now. So like, where is that space for finding interested people, VCs, et cetera, if you can't like physically go to sort of like the hotbed locations?
Yeah, I won't lie, it's hard. Basically the benefit to being in one of the hotter spots, to being in like a Boston or being in a New York or an Austin or a San Francisco, is a lot of the scaffolding to be in this space almost happens organically. Like, there's been a not insignificant number of times where somebody I met who's a strong part of my network, I literally just met walking through the city. And I was like, oh, I know you. And we have coffee, things like that. And so there's a lot of like that accidental or incidental networking that happens in spaces. But if you don't have access to that, the biggest thing I would always just say is be really proactive about poking people that you admire a little bit. Talk to founders, talk to VCs. VCs often fancy themselves like operators in the finance space. They want to be connected to innovation world. And so they want to talk to you. They want to talk to engineers. They want to network. And so don't be afraid to reach out to them at times when you don't need money. Just get to know them. Well, I always say my go-to is always go have coffee, but that's sort of not trivially easy nowadays. Or set up a Zoom coffee, and so just get to know them, because a lot of it has a self-building quality. Once you've started to get to know some of these people, especially successful entrepreneurs who've done this a couple times, successful VCs who've been around the space for a while, they'll start referring you, and it starts to become sort of a gathering quality of like your network just starts to grow. I know, like myself, once I meet people that impress me, I just introduce them to everybody. I'm like, you got to talk to this person, this person, this person. I very quickly start to like get people into touch with others because I want impressive people that I meet to meet other impressive people. It's just sort of the way the industry works, because then 10 years from now, they'll remember that, they'll hire me. Like there's always that sort of like constant swirling quality of technology where I'm going to work with the same people again. That impressive person who I met now, and I'm trying to just get them introduced, 5 years from now, they could be starting a business and looking for a technical co-founder, or they could be or have started a business and are looking for an AI director. And so, or in vice versa, I've now helped them launch a career in 5 years now doing another startup, and I need hires. Like it just sort of, you want to build that web of impressive people around you. And honestly, over time, the funny quality of that is you start to develop a pretty wide network of people who you just keep pulling from. I've worked with the same engineers over and over again. I've worked with the same founding teams over and over again. I've certainly worked with the same VCs over and over again, because you start to develop people that you have a good rapport with. Like I work well with this person. We can hang out and talk technology together, and so it's easier to sort of facilitate that. So the quick answer to your first part of the question is, initially just be really proactive about trying to expand your network in the space. You can do that through referral. Ask, I'll introduce you to people. I'll always be happy to sort of poke around or do it. But this is actually one of a few spaces where if you are doing it cold, but without ask, it actually works quite well. Going cold to a VC, but not asking for money. You literally you're like, I'm new in the tech space. I have interest and I want to pick your brain. There might be a little skepticism initially, but I'm pretty sure they will talk to you. Most of them. I mean, don't go to like a GP at Sequoia first, but you can. There's stages below that where it's a lot easier to accomplish it, especially if they're semi-local to you, or if you're targeting a specific niche or vertical.
That works.
That works.
If I could slip in really quick here at the end.
Shoot.
I really appreciate this talk, Bryan. I'm part of a 3-person startup right now.
Oh, exciting.
So I'm literally living it. And this is my first job and I've only been doing it for a year. So not only do I not have any idea what I'm doing, I'm not even convinced that the people around me know what they're doing.
Nope.
So I am a fish
Yeah.
out of water in a lot of ways. So getting to hear about this from somebody who's actually done it is really super awesome. I could pick your brain for hours on this kind of stuff, but one thing that I'd really like to know from your experience is if you've noticed any kind of red flags from kind of a company standpoint. So a lot of the sort of phases that you were talking about, I recognize, but the timeline with the place that I'm working in is much longer. So what you say should be happening for 6 months. We're on year 3 or 4 of that mode. The 2 people who are the founders this is their first one. Sort of,
right.
If you know of any really clear sort of, if this is happening, it's a signal of X or Y.
Interesting. I mean, there's some common paradigms that I see a lot with people who are getting into the entrepreneurship space but haven't quite found the legs under them. But it's really hard to put things into quantifiable. So like personality is a big one that I sort of key on, and I'm trying to be really careful I word this, because I'm not even necessarily talking about their person's actual personality. I see a lot of early founders are trying to be something, and you can sort of detect that when you're talking to them. They have a Steve Jobs fetish. Like they've sort of like picked a personality they think they want to be, and you can sort of suss that out and sort of how they handle themselves, both when you're dealing off hours, in hours, and sort of trying to get to know them. That's kind of an immaturity thing that a lot of young founders haven't found their personality yet. You don't need to be a jerk or overly you don't need to be a certain thing to succeed in the space. You just have to have enough drive to work through problem sets, and you should be yourself. And that's sort of how it's working through that. Somewhat you can solve for that just by, is this their first volley out? Like they're probably not going to have their sea legs their first time out, and so there's going to be a little bit of a give and take learn scenario there. The more tangible red flags I would look for are hard to figure out before you get there, but things like too spastically handling product. Like if they don't really yet understand or have found the capacity to sort of see a vision through, being able to, this is sort of the weird thing that a lot of people get tripped up on all the time. Startups pivot a lot, but knowing when to pivot is almost an art form in and of itself. You don't pivot every time you struggle with market fit. You pivot once you've really exhausted the capacity to find market fit and you're looking for something alternative. Knowing when to hit that pivot is a maturity thing. And so seeing people who are a little spastic with product decisions, or really willing to chase after every product ask or every product whim is a danger sign. Like you're not going to be able to guide through a rough time and see a product through to completion because you just have the shiny syndrome. Like, oh, customer X wants Y, customers, and that one's hard to score for ahead of time, but you can usually see it pretty quickly once you've joined a team, from how they're sort of setting and managing product vision. There are other sort of like minor red flags that are sort of weird to say out loud because I think they almost set a negative tone in other ways, but like the founder, if anyone else, should be really committed. Like, I don't like it when founders enforce that commitment to everyone who works at a company, especially as the company scales beyond 5 into like the 15, 20 category. But like, if you have a founder who's going home at 4 o'clock or something, that sets an interesting signal of like their commitment to make sure the business succeeds at all costs. It's their business. If they aren't willing to go crazy for the business, then how can they expect employees to do it? And so it's sort of looking for that level of commitment, I think, is important too. That one you actually can a little bit score for ahead of time before you join a business. But as a counter to that, they also shouldn't necessarily be imposing that on people who are high. Like, I also get uncomfortable. People are like, you join this business, you're going to be working every Saturday and Sunday, and I'm going to be slacking you at 1 a.m. every day. Like, there's thresholds there. But does that make sense? I mean, that was a little all over the place, but.
No, yeah, I given the sort of fast reaction nature of that startups seem to have, I wouldn't expect there to be a concise answer to that, but just sort of getting I don't know, like I said, this is very new to me, so just hearing some kind of like qualification out of other people's mouths is like, oh, I'm not crazy, this might be a problem, or like maybe I just need to chill out about that one thing that I'm like personally thinking is a big deal, but maybe it's not as much of one.
It's sort of ironic. The number one thing that I personally look for is one that I have very difficult time putting into words, but there is a distinct personality quality in successful founders that I'd have a hard time putting into bullets, but you can kind of just see it when you meet them. It's a little bit of almost craziness to them. They can wear many hats. They can jump from thing to thing successfully. They're a little bit motivating. They can sort of push people without being overbearing. You sort of see it repeatedly in people who have success at this phase. Exactly, Kirk. Yeah, a little bit of mischievousness, a little bit of sense of anti-establishment quality. To be successful in a startup, you have to be a little bit of like a rule breaker, a little bit intense. And so it's hard to like set up a list of like, look for this, and this, but it is a quality that I've never missed when I saw it. Like I see it in people, and like that person has the thing that I'm used to seeing in people who succeed here. They're willing to do anything to succeed, and they can do multiple things well. They don't have too big of an ego, but enough of an ego that they're willing to push and not give up. Like there's sort of a process there that once you've seen it once, you keep seeing it and you'll keep detecting it in people. And I don't know how else to describe it, unfortunately.
Yeah, like I said, I could ask you questions for a billion years, and I may shoot you some on Slack, but
yeah, please do.
But I suspect people may have other things to do with their day. So, but thank you.
Yeah, totally. Any other questions before we bounce? We're a little bit over, so I want to be cognizant of people's time. Yeah, cool. Well, I hope this was interesting. I sort of blitzed through a bunch of stuff. There's a zillion other topics I got to cover, but I feel like those are the ones that I thought would be more interesting to cover from like the bootstrap to get going phase. And if there's any other follow up, feel free to hit me up on Slack or set up a coffee or whatever makes it interesting.